Hymn books. Again, hymn number 291. 291 in your hymn book. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. We'll stand and sing. Certainly God did that for the Israelites, didn't he? 40 years ago. Dismiss our children for Children's Church at this time. Got it. Thank you for that reminder. Deuteronomy 33 is a blessed passage of Scripture, and it really is perhaps the thought from the song we just sang. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. And that's what he did for Israel. And this passage in Deuteronomy chapter 33 is when they set just on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan, ready to enter into the Canaan land. It's a great song of praise, a doxology to our great, great God. And I think the application to you and I today will be very obvious. Moses started out, as did the patriarchs. The people of Israel were in Egypt. In Genesis chapter 12, God called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldeans, out of a pagan background, and chose him and called him to be his son, and chose him to be the father of a great nation and the fountain of blessing to the world through Christ. Through his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what we know as the patriarchs, God gave many unconditional promises that he would bless them and ultimately would give them a land of their own. Nonetheless, they wandered. They didn't own any land. They didn't own the promised land. The patriarchs, all they had was the promises, but they believed God And they ended up in Egypt. And another Pharaoh arose in Egypt who did not know Joseph. And over the course of time, the people of Israel ended up as slaves rather than as guests. And over the course of time, their slavery became very bitter and harsh. And to the point where at some point, after few hundred years, the Egyptians began to fear the Israelites because they were outnumbering them. That happens in other countries too, where Haiti, for example, where the slaves outnumbered the Haitians, and they had a revolution back 200 years ago, but there was like 4 times more slaves than there were Haitians originally. Anyways, this is what happened. Israel grew to a great number and outnumbered the Egyptians, and they feared, and so the edict of the Pharaoh was, that the midwives were to kill the sons, but Moses' parents did not fear the king nor his edict. And they took little baby Moses and they put him in a basket and put him in the bulrushes on the Nile River. And God, by his providence, arranged for the Pharaoh's daughter to find Moses. And she raised him as his own in the courts of Pharaoh. As Moses grew in all the wisdom of Egypt, however, he knew that that was not his calling. And then he ended up committing murder, defending one of his own brethren, one of the old Israelites, and had to flee for his life. And he fled to Midian. There in the back country of Midian, God called Moses, remember by the burning bush, to go back to Egypt to confront Pharaoh, to lead his people out of Egypt. Let my people go. And so at the age of 80, God calls, sometimes late in life, God calls us. Moses' life was 140 years, or 120 years, three separate periods of time. But anyways, Moses goes back and confronts Pharaoh, and by the miraculous plagues, remember the 10 plagues, and finally the death of the firstborn son, God protected his people Israel when they applied the blood of the lamb to the doorposts. The avenging angel passed over, and so they were protected by the avenging wrath of God, by the blood of the lamb. And Pharaoh finally says, get out of here, go. And Moses, this was in 1290 BC, takes the people of Israel and leads them out of the land of Egypt. And they're left from the land of Goshen, and they no sooner had left, and the Pharaoh changes his mind, and the mighty armies of Egypt follow after them. And remember, Egypt was probably the greatest empire on earth at that time. This was the greatest military power, and the armies and the chariots and the horsemen were following, and they had Israel backed up between the sea and the army, and no place to go. And God miraculously parts the sea, and Israel goes across on dry land, and the armies of Egypt follow, and the waters close down, and God destroys the army of the Egyptians. And we have this great miraculous deliverance of God's people from slavery in Egypt. And so then they travel. Their first stop is at Marah. And this is now just like the day and a half, 2 days after they left. Yep. Okay, after they got through the Red Sea, after these miracles of the 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, the crossing on dry land, and they're complaining. The water's too bitter. We don't like this. And Moses goes to the Lord and says, what am I going to do? The people are complaining. They can't drink this bitter water. And God says, take this tree and throw it in there. And the waters became sweet, and the people rejoiced. That didn't last long, did it? They moved to Elam. And there in Elam, God provides an oasis. 12 dug wells bursting forth with fresh water for God's people. Wow, they should be happy. That lasts for a little while. And then they start complaining. Yeah, but we're hungry. Fresh water is wonderful, but we could sure use something to eat. And God blesses and sends manna and quail. You got your carbohydrates, you got your protein. God provides abundantly for His people. And so then they journey on down along the Gulf of Suez there, the Red Sea, and all the while God is providing this manna and quail. And they come to Rephidim. And again, the people complain. Where's the wells? No water! And so God again graciously says to Moses, I want you to strike the rock. Moses strikes the rock and out comes water. I'm not talking a trickle of water. Remember, there was 600,000 men, not including the women and kids and servants. What else? It was a mixed multitude. Whoever else might came with them. Somewhere in the vicinity of 2 to 2.5 million people need to drink. And God gushes forth river of water from this rock to miraculously provide for His people. It was there at Rephidim that the Amalekites, I don't know, maybe they were jealous of all the water, I don't know, but the Amalekites now attack Israel. And Joshua then takes an appointed group of men to go and fight against the Amalekites. And you recall that when Moses lifts up his rod, his hands to God, Israel prevails and defeats them. But as his arms get weary and come down, the battle goes the other way. And so Aaron and Hur come to his side and take it and help hold up his hands. The battle is won. They're going down to the sun, and they routed the Amalekites. Great victory, great blessing. God fights for Israel. From there they move to Sinai, Mount Sinai. They reach Sinai the first day of the third month, the time they left Israel, or from the time they left Egypt. This isn't a very long time. And now they're going to spend 1 year at Sinai. And it's there that this motley crew of 2.5 million ex-slaves get organized. And they reorganize by tribes. And then they organize the camp. 3 tribes on each side, and the priesthood in the middle, and ultimately it's going to be the tabernacle. And there God sanctifies the mountain and says, nobody come near the mountain, man or beast, and calls Moses to go up on the mountain, and He gives them the 10 Commandments. And then He gives them the entire law. You recall Moses comes down from the mountain, and what does he find? They'd already made a golden calf to worship. There was wickedness and riotous and this idolatry led by Aaron, Moses' brother. And Moses is so angry, he takes the stone tablets that had the law of God written on, and he smashes them. And the idol is destroyed and the people punished. God calls Moses, He says, I want you to cut 2 new stones and bring them on up to me again. And this time He gets the entirety of the law, the civil code, the moral code, concerning the tabernacle and the priesthood and the whole thing. And Moses comes down, and this time Moses comes down and the glory of God is manifested in him. And remember, his face is glowing such that they had to put a sack over him because of the glory of God radiating from him. So instructions for the tabernacle were given while they were at Mount Sinai there. And God especially gifted men to craft the tabernacle in gold and silver and leatherworks and woodwork and whatever else they needed to construct the tabernacle. And there, the construction and all the commandments concerning the use of the tabernacle, was really a portable temple tent, was given. And God came and dwelt there among His people in that portable temple. And the priesthood was organized and set up. So that was a very important time there. Israel now becomes an official nation. And you remember what the people said there at Sinai after God had given them the law, the tabernacle, the temple, the priesthood, everything. The people said, all that the Lord hath said, we will do. Good. It's a good response. So after about a year at Mount Sinai, they moved to Taberah, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. 3 days. 3 days after they leave Mount Sinai, they reach there and they're complaining. And God's anger is kindled against these people, and it says that the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed them. And Moses intercedes for the people, and the fire of the Lord was quenched so that the rest of the people were not consumed. 3 days. So we're talking after these miracles. These are the same people that at Mount Sinai they received the law from God, and the holy mountain, and the smoke, and the lightning, and the thundering, and Moses glowing with the glory of God. 3 days complaining and consumed. And then from there they moved, they moved to Kibroth Hattaavah. God is providing quail, or manna, I should say. I don't know when the quail stopped, but people started complaining again. We want quail again. And so God sends quail. It says the fluttering quail 2 cubits off the ground. And apparently they're just for the taking. You know, you don't even have to bend down to the ground to pick them up. So they're 2 feet off the ground, just fluttering there to help yourself. These lusty, greedy people went out and took and stockpiled it as though God would never give them another bite. And they were so greedy and lustful, it says that while the meat was still in their teeth before they chewed it, they bit it off before they chewed it, God sent a plague among them because of their greed and their lust for meat. The people were complaining again. Moses is going nuts. What am I going to do with these people? I can't judge all these people, all these complaints. I've had enough of these people. Moses is complaining to God. I didn't give birth to these people. They're not my people. What am I going to do with them? And so God says, I want you to get 70 elders. 70 elders were appointed and endued by the Spirit of God to assist Moses in the governing, the leadership of the people of Israel. Interesting. Everywhere they go, there's needs. Everywhere they go, there's problems. Everywhere they go, God provides. God protects. God has the answer. They moved from there to Hazeroth. Marion, the Marion that sang the song of deliverance when they came out of Egypt. Marion, the sister of Moses, and Aaron, the brother of Moses. Now Marion takes the lead and gets Aaron to come along with her, and they blaspheme, slander Moses. Yeah, who made you in charge, by the way? God speaks through us too, you know. We're just as good as you are, Moses. Oh, really? What happens? Leprosy. God turns Marion leprous. And by the grace of God, Moses intercedes again and she is healed. Put that one to rest. God determines who he speaks through and whose his chosen representatives are. So they wander around on up through the wilderness of Paran. For a while it takes, they don't just walk straight there. It's quite a rigorous encampment with all those people. And they get up near the area of Kadesh Barnea. They actually are going to spend about 36, 37, 38 years there. It was there at Kadesh Barnea that they sent in 12 spies into the land of Canaan, into the promised land. They would go north. The promised land that God was going to give them, Israel, is this all up in here. And so they sent spies up into the promised land to search out the land. And the spies came back after 40 days with a great report. It is a land, a rich land, a blessed land, a fruitful land. But the people are giants. They're too big for us. They got fortified cities. Their military prowess. No, we can't. That's not for us. And 10 of the spies had a negative report. Only Caleb and Joshua believed that God, you'd think after all that God has done, that they believe that God can give them the land. No. In fact, it wasn't just those 10 spies that didn't believe God, but do you know that all the people of Israel, the people, believed the negative report? And they said, oh, that God would have let us die in Egypt. Or, oh, that God would have let us die in the wilderness. Surely He's not going to take us to die in that land by those giants. And God heard that. And because of their faithlessness, God says, okay, I'm going to weed you out. All those 20 and over are going to die in the wilderness. Because you have spoken it in my ear, that I will do to you. And everybody 20 years and over died in the wilderness except for Joshua and Caleb. And so they wandered and camped in that area, homeless and rootless, people without a country, until the 40 years was ended. And in fact, that's what God said. 1 year for every day that the spies were in the land. 40 days, 40 years from the time you left Egypt, and you're going to die. I was going to calculate that out, and I never got around to it. How many funerals a day they had if about 2 out of the 2.5 million had to die in that 40 years. That's a lot of funerals. A lot of dead people laying around in those deserts out there. But a reminder that people who don't trust God doesn't end well. If you believe me, if you trust me, I provide, I bless, I give, I sanctify, I save, I deliver. But if you don't, the way of faithlessness is a way of death. So there they were around the Kadesh Barnea area, dying off. It was during that time that some people began to just doubt and but really blaspheme God. The Sabbath day that was so holy that God had given in His law. A day that God had graciously given them for rest, relaxation, for enjoyment, no work. This is a day to enjoy, to rest, and to worship and acknowledge me. They started abusing that day. We'll do what we want on that day. In fact, they found a man picking up kindling sticks. He's going to have himself a fire. I'm going to cook up some stuff, do what I want. They brought him to Moses. What do? Stone him. Not hallowing the Lord on the Lord's day. It was during that time that Korah, one of the priests from the tribe of Levi, a priest of Korah, and now he comes and challenges Aaron on Aaron's authority and his line, the Levites, to be the priesthood. Who put you as God's representative for the priesthood? God did. And so Moses says, okay, well, we'll see. You know how that turns out. And so Korah, along with 250 leaders in Israel, the next morning the earth opens up and swallows them. Oh yeah, not just Korah and the 250 leaders. 14,700 other sympathizers. You think that they're right? You're down in the pit too. You don't want to believe God? You don't want to obey God? You don't want to serve God? Have it your way then. And then Aaron's budding rod. Rod from each of the tribes. You want to see which one God has authorized to be his representative? It was Aaron's rod that budded. So we're winding down in the 39th year now, and it's time to move into the Promised Land. And so they begin to sojourn, had to leave and go south. Remember, this land in here was belonging to the Edomites. And they applied for passage through the land, and the Edomites said no. And God said to Moses, you need to honor that. And so they headed south down to go around the land of Edom. And as they were traveling south, what do you suppose? Yes, the people were complaining. The people were complaining. They grew impatient, weary, tired. This shortcut, no, it's not a shortcut. This long cut you're taking us on, we don't like this. And again, where's the water? And this time God says to Moses, I want you to speak to the rock. And Moses struck the rock. And he did not hallow God before the people. In a sense, he blasphemed God. He soiled the name and glory of God in what he did. And Moses, because of that, was disqualified from entering the Promised Land. God said, you will see the Promised Land, but you will not enter it. Nonetheless, God miraculously provided water for these people again, and it was called Meribah. Meribah means contention, waters of contention, of contending. God contended with his people. It's interesting that you watch the travels of these people, and one of the common features was complaining, grumbling. That's not just an external thing. When people complain about somebody else or about something, it comes from a heart of discontent. It comes from a heart of unbelief. And God was weeding out these unbelievers and bringing in a whole new generation. It was there during that time that Marion died and was buried. Aaron died and was buried during that trip south. Then they head north on up, and they come up to the land of Moab, and they encamp right, I'm pointing right there, and just opposite of Jericho, and they camp there. Now, this is where the book of Deuteronomy was written. And it's interesting because from Genesis chapter 12, you have a movement. God's promises to Abraham and the covenant and the patriarchs on the move, and then to Egypt, and then out of Egypt, although they were 400 bitter years of slavery, out of Egypt, and then 40 years through the wilderness where God provided and conquered and shielded and did everything for his people, met every possible need, solved every possible problem. And he brings them now to the precipice on the Jordan River, and you can see across there's the Promised Land, and you'd think that the book of Deuteronomy now would chronicle for us their entrance into the land, but it doesn't. Deuteronomy is a pause. Wait a second. You've got this entire book now where there's no movement of the people. There's no judgment, there's no fighting, there's no complaining. It's as though God says, hold on a second here, let me repeat myself. Deuteronomy it's like the second law. It's a review of God's law. You are my people whom I have delivered from Egypt. I've taken you all this way. I've brought you to the precipice of the Promised Land. You are my representatives. You are going to go into this land as my people. This is my law. Are you ready? Will you trust me? Will you love me? Will you serve me? Will you obey me? And that's what Deuteronomy is all about. It really has a very special place in the revelation of God. In fact, at the end of the book of Numbers, it says that they were encamped there in the plains of Moab, opposite Jericho. And at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, that's still where they're set. In the first chapter of Joshua, that's where they're set. And now Joshua then, of course, in the book of Deuteronomy, you have the rehearsal of the law again, and then a transition to Joshua, his leadership. And then, of course, the book of Joshua. Joshua is going to take the people into the promised land and is going to fulfill then God's promise way back to the patriarchs. He's going to fulfill the mission that Moses, the leader, brought them out of Egypt and had not yet accomplished. Joshua is going to go in and fulfill that promises of God. So Deuteronomy is a very important book. The acts of Moses in Deuteronomy and the law and his speeches that he gives in Deuteronomy are extremely important. In fact, they're quoted throughout the rest of the Bible. Deuteronomy is. And so even though you don't have people going anywhere doing anything, this is such a crucial book. And it's this rehearsal of the law is something that we need to hear over and over again. The book of Deuteronomy is also set up kind of unique in that it is set up like a suzerainty treaty between the king and the vassals, between a suzerain and the vassals. It was a system that was in place in the ancient Near East 2,000 years, well, back at that time, 4,000 years ago. And so the book of Deuteronomy is sort of set up as a covenant like that. And so it had a historical prologue, had a review of God's laws. This is what he'd already given them, but Moses now rehearses these laws and goes over some specific things that are more important. He highlights things based on what they've been through, where they're going now. Moses is rehearsing the law, but it's coming from his heart. There's some real feeling in some of this that was not stone-cold tablets like it was first given. And then there's the covenant stipulations. The suzerain, the king, he would give stipulations for his vassals. You are my servants, you are my subjects, this is what I expect from you. If you want me to bless you, if you want me to protect you and care for you, then this is what you need to do for me. And we find that in the book of Deuteronomy. One of the features, though, the blessing and cursing section is, if you obey me, these are the blessings that I will give you. If you disobey, if you don't believe, if you don't trust me, then this is what's going to happen. It's going to be a way of cursing and disaster, destruction, and death, and captivity. One of the key features that separates the book of Deuteronomy, however, from other suzerainty treaties was the concept of love. Love of God for his people. The old covenants, the suzerain and the vassals and their covenant between king and subjects was not a loving one. It was an agreement of, I will provide and protect if you worship and such for me, but there was no such thing as love. And yet we find the love of God for his people throughout the book of Deuteronomy. And we find God's call for his people to love him first and foremost throughout the book of Deuteronomy. Remember the great passage in chapter 6, verse 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 there, where he says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. And the words that I command you this day shall be in your heart. And you shall teach them diligently to your children. And shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall write them as a sign on your hands, and they shall be as templates frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. What's God saying? I want you to teach your children to love me. I want you to love me with everything. And I want your children to love me with everything. Don't forget it. And then in chapter 10 of Deuteronomy, he goes on, and some people quoted this. I could ask somebody to quote this for us. It's the passage in Deuteronomy chapter 10, where it says, "O Israel, what doth the Lord require of you?" I'm sure I'm misquoting it now. "But to fear the Lord your God, and to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes, which I command you this day, for your good." And so Deuteronomy is this book of stipulations between God and his people. If you love me, if you trust me, if you obey me, if you serve me, if you follow me, I will pour out on you blessing and blessing and blessing. But if you don't expect it to go well. And then the Song of Moses. The Song of Moses doesn't say he sang it, but apparently he gave it as a song to be sung. The Song of Moses reviews some of the history of Israel and their wanderings, but more so it was a prophetic statement. And it talked about the ever-faithful God, the faithless people, always doubting, always complaining, God's judgments, the people's repentance, God's blessing, the people complaining, people's hearts growing hard and harder, ultimately captivity. And then Moses' song ends with a call to all the nations, call to Israel, for everybody in the world to rejoice. Why? Because God himself will provide an atonement for the land and for his people. Amen. It looks forward to the coming of Jesus Christ and the atonement work that he would do. Ultimately, to the kingdom of God, in which his believing people will be admitted forever. What a song. You ever sung it? We ought to put that to music. And then in the end of chapter 32 and 33, he blesses the tribes. One by one, he has a word of prophetic blessing. To some extent, it was tied to and is reminiscent of Jacob's blessing of the tribes. And yet, it was personal and different, distinct. And there were prophetic statements about these tribes, not real specific, more general statements. A lot having to do with the names of the tribes themselves and what they meant and what God planned for them. And there was no blessing on Simeon, by the way. No blessing on Simeon. Interesting that in the Old Testament, 24 different times, the tribes of Israel are mentioned by name. And not one of those 24 times is the order the same or the listing of all 12 tribes the same. There seems to be always one or two added. Sometimes Joseph is added or Simeon is left out or whatnot. But I have a reason for that, but it's not important right now. And then you've got the final doxology, that love relationship, the Lord to his people. People to his Lord. And Moses, really, it's praise be to God, our great, great God. And Moses, chapter 33, gives this. Makes that great statement, there is no one like the God of Jeshurun, who rides the heavens to help you, and in his excellency on the clouds. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He will thrust out the enemy from before you and will say, destroy! Then Israel will dwell in safety. The fountain of Jacob alone in a land of grain and new wine. His heavens shall also drop dew. Happy are you, O Israel. Blessed, blessed, happy, happy, happy are you, O Israel. Who is like you? A people saved by the Lord. The shield of your help, the sword of your majesty. Your enemies shall submit to you, and you shall tread down their high places. And having said those words, Moses, the man of God, the servant of the Lord, those are his final public words, his final public address is, goodbye, people. And he goes home and packs his bags and he heads to Mount Nebo. I guess he didn't have to pack much in his bags because he's not coming home. God had told him back in chapter 31 or 32, you're going to die on Mount Nebo. And so having concluded these words, this great doxology of praise of God, he goes to Mount Nebo, and there God takes him home. It says his eye was not dimmed, nor his natural force abated. In other words, he didn't die of natural causes or disease. God took him. Amen. So concludes the book of Deuteronomy. Well, it's that great praise to the greatness of our God that I want to study today. So you got the introduction. I beg of you to come back next week and rejoice with me. And I would encourage you to even hide that doxology in your heart. I don't know what in that you'd not want to be part of your memory banks. Maybe that would be one of those passages that you'd memorize to the greatness of our God. Let's stand and let's close with singing, Our God is an Awesome God.
Introduction into Deuteronomy, and we just pray that you guide Pastor as he dives into this and all the complexities and all the things that we may have forgotten about the law that Moses wrote before he died. And just thank you for all the insight and reminder of how great you are. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.